And as we continue following reaction to the Rittenhouse verdict and await closing arguments in the Ahmaud Arbery murder trial, we continue our deeper dive into the wider impact of these cases when it comes to race relations in this country. Joining us is civil rights attorney Nekima Levy Armstrong. Nekima, thank you so much for joining us.
Thank you for having me, Kenneth.
Nekima, first, your reaction to the verdict in the Rittenhouse trial today.
I was deeply disappointed in the verdict, although not surprised. We know that there are two systems of justice in this country, one for white folks and one for Black people and other people of color. That was on full display throughout this entire trial. I understand that the jury had a very difficult decision to make, albeit their jury instructions were complex and difficult to decipher, which I think may have contributed to the outcome. In addition, of course, there's the matter of Wisconsin law, which allows someone to open carry in a situation like what Kyle Rittenhouse was on trial for. But the problem has to do with people like Kyle and other militia type individuals who insert themselves in protests where we are standing up and demanding a change to our justice system that typically allows police officers to kill people with impunity. I mean, that was the whole purpose of people being out on the front lines in Kenosha, standing up for justice for Jacob Blake, who was unjustly shot multiple times by Kenosha police officers, and asserting their First Amendment rights to freedom of speech and declaring that they wanted to see a change. And so we've had folks like Kyle show up at protests, brandishing artillery and weapons and creating an even more volatile and dangerous situation. It's unacceptable.
What message does all of this send to the civil rights community, in your opinion? And so many people are asking, does this all set a precedent?
I think that it sets a very dangerous precedent for those of us who are on the front lines protesting and demonstrating and standing up for Black lives. We are not protected from police violence when we're on the front lines. We often already have to face tear gas and arrests and other hostile and traumatizing behavior. And now there's a whole other dimension, primarily of white men showing up armed to the teeth and allowed to roam freely through the streets. And so it sends a message that we will not be protected. So we have to be prepared to protect ourselves. In Minneapolis, in the aftermath of George Floyd being killed, many of us felt the threat and the presence of white supremacists who came into town, threatening people in the community, writing notes on people's cars and windows if they had a Black Lives Matter sign, and even chasing people with weapons. This issue was undercovered in our media, and it made many of us feel unsafe. So many of us went and got our license to carry, our conceal and carry permit, to protect ourselves and to arm ourselves because of this additional danger that we face out on the front lines.
And Nekima, what do you think this case and the pending verdict in the Ahmaud Arbery trial tell us about where we are as a society? Do you expect a big national response, massive protests in these streets? Because many would say yes, while we're waiting on a verdict. Some would argue that, years ago, it was just tough to get to this point of getting someone charged in these types of incidents and cases.
Well, I think that this demonstrates yet again that we have a long way to go in terms of addressing the unreconciled racial issues in America. What we saw from Kyle Rittenhouse and what we saw from the McMichaels, as well as Roddy Bryan, is this mindset of a white male privilege and white male entitlement, and being able to unjustly use the Second Amendment to attack and harm those who are jogging like Ahmaud Arbery was doing, or those who are standing on the front lines of a protest. And so at the end of the day, we have to be honest about where we stand as a country with regard to race relations. We have to look at a lot of the white supremacy that was brought to the surface during the Trump administration. And looking back at what happened on January 6th, it shows that there are factions in this country who are willing to assert themselves and their rights by any means necessary, even if that means shooting and killing people who do not pose a threat to their existence.
And with the trial and the death of Ahmaud Arbery, clearly a huge national conversation around race happening with hundreds of black clergy and people from around the country rallying this week. The defense argues that their presence creates a problem for them. We've heard those complaints again today. So what do you think? Does it hurt the defendants to have black pastors and Black Lives Matter activists in and around the courtroom, especially considering that defense attorney Kevin Goff, the attorney for William Roddy Bryant, could likely use all of that as an appeal if his client is convicted?
Well, I've been highly disturbed by the conduct of Kevin Goff in this case. Number one, drawing attention to the presence of black pastors and then trying to use the attention that he brought as the grounds for requesting a mistrial in this case. And then today he took things even a step further and he called the rallies by the black pastors and activists outside the courthouse a modern day lynching. That was completely absurd and unconscionable for him to utter those words. What Ahmaud Arbery experienced was actually more akin to a modern day lynching than having black folks and black clergy in and outside of the courtroom simply praying and standing up for justice. That's what they should be doing. What hurts the defense is the conduct of the defendants in this case that opened the door to this trial to begin with.
In both these big trials, Rittenhouse and the one involving the death of Ahmaud Arbery, armed defendants are claiming self-defense after shooting unarmed people. They say the threat came from the possibility of their own gun being taken and used against them. What do you think about that?
Well, I think, number one, when you look at the circumstances surrounding those two cases, in both instances, white men inserted themselves into the lives of black people as well as protesters and allies and created a hostile, volatile, and dangerous situation. Those individuals need to understand that they are not above the law, that we have licensed police officers for a reason, and they should not assume that they have the power and the privilege of accosting someone, even trying to hold someone under arrest or pulling a gun on someone in the name of protection of property and justice. It's unacceptable that these things are continuing to happen. And as advocates, we have to continue to take a stand. We have to continue to call out these injustices. And I would urge parents, particularly white parents, to have conversations with their children about these issues. Kyle Rittenhouse was only 17 years old. And rather than his mom teaching him about the historical issues of racial injustice in this country and what led to the protests in Kenosha, she actually drove him across state lines, and it opened the door to these atrocities that we now have to contend with. So white parents must do a better job of instilling a different set of values in their children surrounding race relations. And we know that it's not all white parents, but at the same time, there are enough white families who are embroiled in these underlying racial issues and who perpetuate white supremacy that it needs to be talked about.
Civil rights attorney Nekima Levy Armstrong, thank you so much for your time. We appreciate it.
Thank you for having me.
Hi, everyone. George Stephanopoulos here. Thanks for checking out the ABC News YouTube channel. If you'd like to get more videos, show highlights, and watch live event coverage, click on the right over here to subscribe to our channel. And don't forget to download the ABC News app for breaking news alerts. Thanks for watching.